Hi, I'm Maura. My parents called me a freeloader after I paid their mortgage for 7 years. Asterisk, asterisk. When I stopped, they said I ruined the family. Then, they tried to sell the house, the one I paid for, without telling me. But that wasn't even the worst part. They came to my job. They lied about me online. They even stole my identity. Now I have one question stuck in my head. How far will your own family go? When you stop playing the role they need you to play? What would you have done? Tell me in the comments. And don't forget to follow for more stories like mine. The rain had softened into a mist by the time I reached my condo, but the cold had already settled into my skin. I dropped my keys in the tray, pulled off my coat, and stared blankly at the wall like it might offer some explanation for what I'd just heard. You deserve the help more than she ever will. It kept replaying in my mind. My mother's voice, soft and final. Like she hadn't just carved me out of the family with one sentence. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I just opened my laptop and deleted the scheduled payment titled Mom and Dad's Mortgage, a payment I'd been making for 7 years. I stared at the screen, half expecting some wave of guilt to wash over me like it used to. But nothing came. I closed the 852 Lexa 74 laptop, poured myself a glass of water, and walked into my bedroom without turning on the lights. That night, I didn't dream. Saturday morning came with sunshine, ironic as hell. I pulled on a hoodie, grabbed coffee from the corner spot, and walked 3 blocks to the farmer's market like I usually did. I needed to act normal, pretend I wasn't standing on the edge of unraveling. My phone buzzed in my pocket. It was a text from Mom. Pick up some apples if you're going by the market. Travis likes the tart ones. No, please. No, thank you. Just a demand, for him. Not once had she asked how I was doing, if I was sleeping, if work had been hard. I stared at the message. Then I turned my phone face down on the table and let it vibrate until the battery died. By noon, I'd gone back to their house, not because I wanted to, but because I needed to clear up a few loose ends. There was still a stack of envelopes I hadn't gone through last night, and if I knew anything about my parents, it was that they wouldn't stop until they squeezed every drop of use out of me before discarding me entirely. Mom was in the kitchen chopping onions like the world hadn't shifted. "You look tired," she said flatly. "Didn't sleep much?" I replied, flipping through the letters on the counter. One was from the credit union again. This time it was marked Notice of Withdrawal. I slid it into my purse when she wasn't looking. "You still coming to dinner tomorrow?" Dad called from the living room, his eyes on the TV. "I don't know," I said. "Got a lot going on." "You work too much," he mumbled. "You're gonna miss out on what matters." I almost laughed. What mattered? Was it the mortgage I paid but never got credit for? The birthdays I covered because Travis hadn't found his footing yet? The trips I didn't take so Mom and Dad could go to Arizona every winter? The house was quiet except for the TV. I looked at the faces that used to feel like home and realized I didn't belong here anymore. Back at my place, I opened the credit union envelope. It was worse than I thought, a savings account under Mom's name, recurring transfers just like before. But now I noticed the account was linked directly to Travis Calderon as the primary recipient. I scrolled further. The dates matched up exactly with the days I sent in the mortgage money. They hadn't even bothered to hide it. I sat on the floor, legs crossed like a child, and pulled out my receipts. I had every bank statement saved, every confirmation email. Part of me had always known I'd need to defend myself, just never from the people who raised me. Travis hadn't worked a steady job in 5 years. He claimed to be building his brand on YouTube, but his videos barely hit 500 views. Yet somehow he always had new shoes, new tech, new excuses. Mom said he just needed time. I gave him 7 years, and they gave him my money. Sunday dinner came faster than I expected. I told myself I wouldn't go, that I'd draw the line. But then guilt knocked on my door, like it always did, wearing the same perfume as obligation. I showed up late. They were already seated, table set, wine poured. "Look who decided to grace us with her presence," Travis smirked. I ignored him and placed Dad's gift, a vintage baseball card set, next to his plate. Mom passed me mashed potatoes without a word. Halfway through dinner, I mentioned casually that I was thinking of moving to a smaller apartment. "Why?" Travis scoffed, reaching for the roast. "So you can freeload somewhere else?" The fork slipped from my hand. Mom flinched, but she didn't say a word. Dad cleared his throat, eyes still on his plate. "He's just joking, kiddo." No one laughed. I excused myself, walked into the bathroom, and locked the door. My reflection looked back at me like a stranger. Freeloader. On the drive home, I didn't cry. I didn't even blink. The freeway was a blur, the world silent. The next morning, my cousin texted, "Hey, Uncle Harold said something weird at the BBQ. Something like, Maura still leans on the family for everything, but she sure acts like a saint." I read it 3 times. My fingers trembled as I typed, then erased the reply. So now I was a joke, a burden, a liability. They had taken my silence for weakness. By Monday morning, I was back at work, spreadsheets open, headphones in, walls up. But inside, something was different. A sharpness, a line drawn. I opened a new folder on my desktop and named it Contingency. Inside, I began dragging files, mortgage receipts, bank statements, everything I'd ever done for the people who now saw me as disposable. They called me a freeloader. They had no idea what I was about to take away from them. I thought I could keep it together for one more weekend. After all, it was just dinner, a birthday meal for my father, nothing more. I told myself I could fake a smile for 2 hours, pass the potatoes, laugh politely at half-baked jokes, then leave. No damage done, no deeper cuts. I wore black slacks and a gray blouse. Neutral colors, forgettable. The kind of outfit you put on when you want to be present but invisible. I arrived at the house a few minutes late. Not enough to be rude, just enough to avoid small talk in the kitchen. Mom answered the door, gave me a once-over, then stepped aside without a word. Dad was in the living room, TV on mute, flipping through channels like nothing mattered except the remote in his hand. He glanced up, gave a half-smile, and said, "You made it." "I said I would," I replied, handing him the birthday card I'd spent an hour choosing and the vintage baseball card I'd tracked down online. He took it with a nod, then set it down on the coffee table without even opening it. Dinner was already on the table. Roast beef, mashed potatoes, green beans slick with butter. Everything looked homemade, except I knew Mom had picked most of it up from that overpriced deli off Fairview. She always did that and called it saving energy. Travis walked in 15 minutes late, wearing a bomber jacket and sunglasses on his head like he'd just stepped off a film set. He clapped Dad on the back, tossed his keys onto the counter, and said, "Happy birthday, old man. Hope this party's more exciting than last year." "Don't be rude," Mom said, but she was smiling. He talked nonstop about some influencer collab, about monetizing his platform, about how followers were currency now. I poured myself a glass of wine and sipped slowly, chewing my food like it might disappear if I blinked too long. No one asked about my work. No one cared that I just wrapped a $1 million project 2 weeks ahead of deadline. I was background noise, an afterthought with a decent paycheck. Halfway through the meal, I said it without even thinking, just an offhand remark while reaching for the salt. "I'm thinking about downsizing. My place is bigger than I need." Travis didn't miss a beat. He lifted his glass, grinning. "Why? So you can freeload somewhere else?" The words hit like a slap I didn't see coming. The room went still. I froze, eyes locked on his smirk. Mom looked down at her plate. Dad cleared his throat and muttered, "He's just joking, kiddo." Joking. Joking was calling someone forgetful. Joking was teasing about bad parking, not calling your sister a parasite in front of your parents during a birthday dinner. I pushed my chair back and excused myself. My legs moved on autopilot as I found the downstairs bathroom and locked the door behind me. The light above the mirror flickered. I stared at myself, hands gripping the sink. "Freeloader," it echoed, not just in the bathroom, but in every space I had ever occupied in this family. I didn't cry, I didn't scream, I just breathed. In through the nose, out through clenched teeth. I left before dessert, said I had a migraine. No one stopped me. The night air bit at my skin as I walked to the car. The silence inside was louder than any insult Travis had ever thrown my way. I drove with the windows down, letting the cold slap me awake. When I got home, I kicked off my shoes and sank into the couch. The room smelled like lavender and laundry sheets, my version of comfort. I sat there in the dark for a long while, the taste of roast beef still lingering in my mouth like a lie I couldn't spit out. Sometime after midnight, my phone buzzed, a text from my cousin in Seattle. "Hey, I heard something weird. Uncle Harold said at the BBQ last weekend that you still lean on the family for everything, even though you make 6 figures. What's that about?" I read it once, twice, then a third time just to be sure I wasn't imagining it. So it wasn't just Travis. It wasn't just a slip of the tongue. It was a narrative. I was the one they rolled their eyes about behind closed doors. The successful sister who, somehow, was still a burden. The daughter who paid the bills but never paid enough to be respected. I took a shower, scrubbing my skin like I could wash off the shame. Then I wrapped myself in a robe and sat at the kitchen island, lights dim, laptop open. I pulled up my bank app, scanned every monthly transfer I'd made, every Venmo payment, every time I'd bailed out Travis, paid Mom's utilities, covered a trip to urgent care for Dad because they'd let their insurance lapse, again. I opened a fresh document and typed in bold, "Debt contributions unrecorded support history." I wasn't sure where this was going yet, but I knew one thing. They had built a house on my back, and I was done holding the weight. The cafe was quiet, save for the occasional hiss of the espresso machine and murmured conversations from the far side of the room. I had chosen this place for a reason. It was neutral ground. Not our kitchen table, not their house, not anywhere that held too much memory. I arrived 15 minutes early, ordered a black coffee, and sat by the window with my hands wrapped around the ceramic cup. My reflection in the glass looked calm, controlled. But inside, I was reciting lines like a script I couldn't afford to forget. They walked in exactly on time. Mom wore a beige blazer like she was headed to Sunday service. Dad had that weathered denim jacket he always wore when he wanted to come off approachable. I stood, hugged them both lightly, and gestured to the table. Small talk happened first, of course. Dad asked about work, barely listening. Mom mentioned the neighbor's daughter getting engaged. I smiled, nodded, pretended to care. Halfway through the second round of coffee, I leaned forward and said it. Calm, precise. "I've been thinking, it only makes sense for my name to be on the deed, after all these years of payments." Dad blinked once, then looked at Mom. She sipped her drink without glancing up. "I'm not asking for anything that isn't fair," I added. "Just legal protection for what I've contributed. That's all." Silence stretched long enough to make the table feel colder. Dad was the first to speak. His voice had that low, measured tone he used when he didn't want to sound confrontational, but still wanted control. "This house is family property, Maura. No one's asking you to give it. No one's taking anything away. So let's not complicate things with extra paperwork." I sat straighter. "Complicate what exactly?" Mom finally looked up. "It's going to stay in the family, honey. That's what matters." A pause passed between us, and I realized this wasn't ignorance. This was calculation. "And I'm not family?" I asked. Dad shifted uncomfortably. "Of course you are. Don't be dramatic." It wasn't drama. It was a fact. I pushed a little further, keeping my voice even. "Look, I've never asked for recognition, but if I'm the one covering the mortgage, the least I should have is a name on the deed. That's basic." Mom gave me a tight smile. "You're not married. You don't have kids. Who exactly do you think is going to inherit it after you?" Her words weren't loud, but they were sharp enough to draw blood. I stared at her. "Wow." "It's not personal," she added too quickly. "We're just thinking long term." "Right," I said, standing up. "You're thinking about the legacy you want to leave behind, and I'm just, what, the placeholder?" "Don't twist this," Dad said, raising his hand like I was a child about to throw a tantrum. I didn't twist anything. They did. I didn't storm out. I didn't slam my chair back. I simply gathered my purse, nodded once, and walked to the counter to pay the bill myself. Outside, the air was dry and cold, the kind that makes your skin sting when you breathe too deep. I stood on the sidewalk, letting the wind cut through me. A couple walked by with a toddler between them, giggling and swinging her arms. The mother looked over her shoulder and smiled at me like I was part of the world she belonged to. I smiled back, even though my chest felt like it had been carved hollow. Back at my condo, I kicked off my flats and dropped my bag by the door. I didn't bother turning on the lights. My place had always been modest, clean, quiet, controlled. But tonight, it felt smaller, like the walls were closing in. I poured a glass of water and sat on the couch. 7 years. 7 years of canceled vacations, skipped date nights, birthday gifts for them instead of myself. I'd watched my friends build lives while I funneled every extra dollar into a house I would never own. I was the financial backbone, the emergency fund, the invisible investor, but not part of the plan, not even a footnote. I walked over to my desk, opened my laptop, and pulled up the folder I'd started last week, the one where I tracked every wire transfer, every Venmo receipt, every invoice I'd paid on their behalf. I renamed the folder. Contingency became severance, because this wasn't temporary anymore. It was the beginning of an exit. I parked in front of the house with a bag of groceries in the passenger seat, mentally preparing myself to drop them off and get out before anyone started talking too much. It was supposed to be a quick stop, just a neighborly favor, just another way I proved I still belonged, even when I knew better. As I stepped out, Alan from next door was trimming his hedges. He waved casually, then walked over with that easygoing smile he always wore, like nothing in the world ever rattled him. "Hey, Maura," he said, wiping his hands on his flannel. "You guys moving out?" I blinked. "Moving?" "Yeah, I saw a real estate guy out front yesterday, taking pictures of the house, tripod, wide lens, looked official." My breath caught mid-step. I forced a casual smile. "Oh, probably just checking comps in the neighborhood." He nodded. "Could be, but he was on your lawn. Got a couple shots from the driveway, too." I murmured something about being in a rush and turned back to my car. The groceries were forgotten. My stomach twisted into a knot that only tightened with each beat of silence. Back home, I dropped my keys, didn't bother taking off my jacket, and went straight to my desk. I opened Zillow first. Nothing. Then Redfin. Still nothing. I pulled up Realtor.com and typed in my parents' street name. There it was, 3-bedroom, 2-bath, single-family home in central Boise, listed as motivated seller. Agent, Travis Calderon. I stared at the screen. Motivated seller. No mention of the 7 years of silent funding. No mention of the ghost investor who had held up that roof every month. Just a cheerful line about new beginnings for the next lucky homeowner. I felt my body go still, the kind of stillness you only feel before something inside you detonates. I took screenshots, every angle, every line of copy. Then I clicked over to my bank account. Transfers to Lorraine Velasquez. Same dates, same amounts, every single month. My phone buzzed. It was a notification from my task app, reminding me to schedule October's mortgage payment. I stared at it like it belonged to someone else. Then I opened messages. Me. We need to talk. Now. Travis. Busy. Talk to mom, like she was the branch manager of this heist, like I wasn't even worth a proper response. I sat back in my chair and exhaled through my nose, long and slow. They weren't just ungrateful. They were moving forward without me, quietly, deliberately, like I was some disposable resource they'd already depleted. And now, they were cashing out. I opened the folder I had renamed Severance the week before. Inside were bank transfers, Venmo receipts, text messages, and that first real estate email from 2016 when they asked me to help just for a little while. I added the new screenshots, uploaded the listing link, logged my notes. Then I began drafting an itemized statement. Title, Unreturned Contributions Mortgage Record 2016 Present. Not for them, for me. For the lawyer I hadn't hired yet but would. I poured a glass of water and leaned against the counter, staring out at the city lights blinking beyond the window. The apartment was quiet, just the hum of the fridge and the sound of my own pulse in my ears. I wasn't naive. I knew they saw me as less. Unmarried, no children, just a daughter who didn't fit the mold. But this? Selling the house behind my back while collecting payments from me? That wasn't neglect. That was theft. I opened my phone and typed slowly, carefully. To Mom and Dad. Message, call off the listing, or I'll make the bank call you. I hovered over send for a second, then tapped it. Then I added the final document to my folder, a list titled Contingency Phase 2 Legal Contact Log, because this wasn't about family anymore. This was about ownership. Mine. The office smelled like fresh toner and weak coffee, and for a moment, it was my safe space again. Just another Wednesday morning with client audits on my screen and the mindless buzz of fluorescent lights above. I was midway through a claims report when Candace, our front desk receptionist, tapped gently on my glass door. "There's a situation downstairs," she whispered, leaning in like she was protecting me from whatever was about to follow. "Some people, they said they're your family." I froze. "Family?" She nodded, her voice even softer now. "They're loud." I didn't run. I walked calmly down the stairs to the lobby, every step slow and deliberate, even though my heart was hammering like a warning bell. There they were, right by the security desk like they owned the building. My mother, in a navy windbreaker zipped up to her chin, arms crossed like she was staging a protest. My father stood beside her, silent but present, and Travis, God help me, was pacing like he was about to drop a mic. "She's trying to evict our parents," he yelled, pointing toward the reception desk. "She's kicking our family out of their own house. You people really work with someone like that?" Heads turned. People peeked from cubicles. I caught sight of 2 junior analysts whispering near the stairwell, phones clutched tight in their hands. I stepped forward, my voice cool and firm. "This isn't the place, Travis." "You made it public first," he shot back. "Sending threats, making legal moves behind our backs. You act like we're strangers." I raised a hand. "Enough." Lorraine's eyes widened. "You're embarrassing yourself," I added. Miss Green, our HR manager, appeared like a blessing behind me. She nodded toward the front doors. "I'm going to ask you all to leave," she said calmly. "This is a private workplace." Harold muttered something under his breath. Something about ungrateful daughters and bad influences. I didn't respond. I didn't need to. They left. Slowly, reluctantly, but not before Travis turned over his shoulder and shouted, "She stole from us! Tell your coworkers the truth!" The moment the door shut behind them, the building seemed to exhale. But the damage had already settled like ash in the air. Back upstairs, I sat at my desk, hands still trembling, trying to refocus on the numbers on my screen. But nothing held. June knocked on my door later that afternoon. She closed it behind her and sat without being asked. "You okay?" she asked, her tone careful, too careful. "I'm fine," I lied. She bit her lip. "Look, I think you should know. People are talking." "Talking?" "HR's fielding questions. Some folks are asking if you're under investigation. I heard one guy in accounting call you the daughter who stole her parents' house." I laughed once, flat and bitter. "I'm telling you because you deserve to hear it from someone who actually likes you," June added. "Not from a memo." I thanked her, then sat in silence for a long time after she left. My screen had gone dark. I didn't touch it. That night, I couldn't sleep. My mind raced, flipping between embarrassment and fury like a switch stuck in the middle. Around 2 a.m., my phone buzzed. Subject line, request for voluntary leave, pending investigation. My breath caught, not from surprise, but from recognition. They hadn't just ruined my morning. They had put a dent in my career. They had taken everything personal and made it professional. I got out of bed, opened my laptop, and clicked on the folder. Severance. This time, I didn't just collect. I began to build. Contracts, mortgage documents, proof of deposits, screenshots of texts. Every legal stone I had left unturned. I flipped it over. They wanted war? Then let them see what it feels like when I stop holding back. By 4 a.m., I drafted a letter to my attorney friend from college. I hadn't spoken to Mia in years, but I knew she'd answer. I was done waiting for respect, done chasing approval from people who used my silence like currency. Before I went back to bed, I picked up my phone and typed one final message. 2. Travis, Mom, Dad. Message. From here on, I will only speak through legal counsel. You've crossed the final line. I powered off the phone, and for the first time in weeks, I fell asleep to real silence. Not the kind filled with guilt, or doubt, but the kind earned when you finally shut a door. The next morning, I made coffee and opened my banking app like always. At the top of the screen, a flashing red alert. Account activity blocked, fraud suspicion triggered. My mug hit the counter a little too hard, because now they weren't just coming after my reputation. They were going after my money. The room was dark, but my phone's screen glared in my face like it had something to prove. I sat up slowly, rereading the loan notification 3 times. The account was real. The debt was real. But the signature? Not mine. My stomach twisted as I dug through my email history. There it was, a scanned version of my 2018 tax return, the same one I'd emailed to my dad when he needed help with FAFSA stuff for Travis. He'd said it was just for verification. I was stupid enough to believe him, and now it had become the key to a loan I'd never agreed to, under a name I still lived with but barely recognized anymore. I called the bank as the sun began pushing through the blinds. 4 transfers later, I finally reached someone who could explain. Yes, Ms. Velasquez, the application was processed 2 weeks ago. The paperwork used aligns with a return dated April 2018. Co-signer, Harold Velasquez. I was silent for so long the woman asked, "Ma'am, are you still with me?" "I'm here," I said quietly. "Just stunned." She hesitated, then continued professionally. "Would you like to file a fraud report?" I almost laughed. Would I like to? Yes, file it immediately. I gave her my full statement, emailed my ID, took down the case number. When the call ended, I didn't cry. I didn't even shake. I just sat there with my jaw locked and one clear sentence ringing through my head. They didn't just steal my dignity, they stole my identity. By noon, I was sitting in a downtown office across from Mr. Cardoza, a sharp-eyed attorney recommended by my old law professor. His desk was bare except for a legal pad, a fountain pen, and a paperweight shaped like the scales of justice. I slid a flash drive across the table. Everything you'll need is on that. Bank statements, mortgage transactions, every transfer since 2016, text messages, real estate listings, and now identity theft. He nodded slowly, inserted the drive into his laptop, and began scrolling. "You've been documenting this a long time," he said after a moment. "I kept hoping I wouldn't need to." He leaned back in his chair. "Maura, this isn't about hope anymore. This is about accountability. You're not just walking away from them, you're holding them to the fire." I didn't smile. I just nodded. "I'm ready." That evening, I went home, closed the blinds, and sat on the floor with my laptop and notebook. I called the bank again, this time to freeze all joint accounts. Every automatic payment tied to their utilities, insurance, or subscriptions, canceled. I called the credit bureau and placed an alert on my file. Then I locked down my tax records with a new PIN. Afterward, I opened my notes app and typed the final message. "This is no longer a conversation. You made me your scapegoat. I'm done being your silent investor." I hit send, blocked the thread, and then, for the first time in a month, I let the silence sit without needing to fill it. Around 10, I stood in front of my bathroom mirror. My hair was a mess, my eyes were heavy, but my voice was solid. "They want war?" I whispered. "Let's see how they handle one they can't manipulate." I stared at my reflection longer than usual. She didn't flinch. That woman? She was done being patient. 3 hours later, as I was organizing my legal files, a notification pinged from YouTube. It was Travis. Title: "My sister just destroyed our family and wants the house for herself." I clicked without hesitation. The thumbnail showed him sitting in front of his gaming setup, fake tears in his eyes, with a banner headline that read, "Family Betrayal." "Hey guys," he began, voice trembling like an amateur actor. "This video is hard for me to make, but my sister Maura, yeah, she's suing our parents. She's trying to take the only home we've ever known." He sniffled. "And for what? Attention? Money? I don't even know anymore." He pointed to a screenshot of my text message. Blurred, of course, but just clear enough for the drama. I closed the tab. I wasn't going to fight on his stage. Mine was the courtroom. I rolled over in bed to silence the endless vibration of my phone. The screen was lit up with missed calls, DMs, and a flood of notifications. Twitter, Instagram, Slack, even my old college alumni group thread. The noise wasn't just digital, it was starting to bleed into my real life. A message from June blinked on my lock screen. "Hey, have you seen what Travis posted?" My stomach knotted. I tapped open the video link with dread sitting like lead in my throat. "She took my parents' house and left us with nothing." That was the title. The thumbnail showed Travis with red, puffy eyes, surrounded by soft lighting and a tragic-looking hoodie. He started the video with a long pause, then sighed dramatically. "This is the hardest thing I've ever had to do," he said, "but I can't stay silent while my sister, Maura, destroys our family." He peppered in phrases like legal attack, no empathy, and she cut off our utilities just to spite us. Then came the icing, a blurry screenshot of a text message, cropped out of context, and a voice recording so heavily edited it barely sounded like me. The comments section was a battlefield. "Wow, what a greedy witch. She's probably doing this for inheritance. Who sues their own parents? #Team Travis. This makes me sick." I closed the app. At work, whispers followed me like shadows. Miss Green requested a quick meeting to check on things. She tried to sound neutral, but I could feel the HR tightrope she was walking. June caught me by the vending machine. "They think you're the villain now, Maura," she said softly. "Someone even asked if you'd been suspended." I didn't respond. My hands trembled as I inserted the coins. My Snickers bar dropped, and somehow, that tiny clunk felt like the last thread holding me together. That night, I didn't eat. I didn't turn on the lights. I just laid flat on the couch, eyes locked on the ceiling fan as it spun lazily overhead. "It's not enough that they lied to my face," I whispered into the dark. "Now they want to make the whole world believe it too." I grabbed my phone and called Mr. Cardoza. "I'm ready," I said. "Let's go public, with the truth." The next day, we filmed a quiet, clean video. No sob stories, no music, no drama, just me and a plain white backdrop. I showed bank transfers, every monthly mortgage deposit for 7 years. I showed the property listing, with Travis's name as the agent. I scrolled through the texts they'd sent, demanding money. I revealed the forged loan application, complete with my 2018 tax return. Then I looked into the camera and said, "This isn't about revenge, it's about facts. This is what they did, and I let it happen for too long." We uploaded it without fanfare, no hashtags, no clickbait. The response was slow. I expected silence. Then it flipped. One comment. "She's got receipts." Then another. "Wait, so he used her to pay the mortgage and tried to sell the house behind her back?" And another. "She didn't ruin the family, she exposed it." By the following morning, Travis's video had a new title, "Removed by User." His sponsors began pulling out. A podcast episode where he'd been booked to speak on family values replaced his segment with a voiceover. This content has been retracted pending investigation. I watched it all unfold not with glee, but with silence. Not because I didn't feel anything, but because I finally felt peace. The truth didn't erase the hurt. It didn't fix what they broke, but it stood tall, and this time, it stood in my corner. That evening, I poured myself a cup of tea and opened the windows. Boise's air was crisp in mid-October, and the sound of distant traffic felt oddly comforting. For once, I wasn't drowning in chaos. I could think. Then my phone buzzed. It was a text from Lorraine. "I hope you're happy. You ruined everything." I stared at the message. No apology, no acknowledgement, just blame. But for the first time, I didn't feel guilty. I didn't feel like the child trying to earn her parents' love. I didn't feel like a fraud wearing her last name. I just felt done. I was sipping cold chamomile tea when my phone buzzed on the counter. I didn't rush to check it. Lately, everything that came from that screen brought trouble. But something tugged at me to look this time. It was a message from my mother. "I miss you." I stood still for a moment, blinking. That was it, just 3 words. No punctuation, no fire, no drama, just space. I almost deleted it without responding. Then another ping followed. "Dad isn't doing well. The stress. If you don't come home soon, he may not recover." My knees didn't buckle, but I sat anyway. My fingers hovered over the screen, unsure whether to reply or scream. Images from childhood floated up, uninvited. My father kneeling beside me in the garage, helping me balance a lopsided science project with his calloused hands, holding a flashlight while I tightened bolts, quietly clapping at my school recitals, even when he had to work a double shift and barely made it in time. But then, another memory slid in like ice water. The night Travis laughed at me across the dinner table, calling me a freeloader. My father had just sat there swirling his drink. Not a word in my defense. Not even a glance. That silence had screamed louder than any insult. Loving him didn't mean I had to forget what he allowed. Still, 2 hours later, I found myself driving down the freeway toward the hospital. It wasn't forgiveness pulling me there. It was something more primitive, human, needing closure, needing to see for myself. The parking lot was half empty. I sat in my car for a while, watching the wind nudge a crumpled Burger King bag along the asphalt. When I finally stepped inside, the antiseptic air and pale overhead lights pulled me back to every time I'd visited hospitals for clients, not family. But this time, it was personal. In the waiting area, Lorraine sat alone, flipping through a celebrity gossip magazine with no real interest. Her purse lay open beside her. When she looked up and saw me, her expression didn't soften. She didn't stand. "You happy now?" she said, barely above a whisper. I didn't blink. "I came because he's still my father," I replied. "But I'm not here for your approval." She closed the magazine slowly. "This family is falling apart. And for what? Paperwork? Ego?" I sat across from her, elbows on my knees. My voice was even. "No, Lorraine. This family fell apart the moment you chose silence over support, when you let Travis lie to the world, when you used guilt instead of love. You keep acting like this is about greed, but it's about respect. And if you don't understand the difference, that's not on me." She flinched at the use of her name. "You're still trying to control me," I continued, "with shame, with guilt, with fear. But I'm not 16 anymore." She swallowed hard. "We were scared of losing everything. We didn't know what else to do." "And so you picked him," I said. "You made your choice." Her jaw clenched. "He's all we have." I stood. "Then you've already lost me." I walked out without asking to see Harold. Maybe he was sleeping. Maybe he wasn't. It didn't matter. This wasn't about bedside moments or final goodbyes. This was about lines drawn in sand that never got washed away. Back at home, I turned on the bedroom lamp and stared at my reflection in the mirror. The woman staring back didn't look like a victim anymore. Her eyes were clear. Her shoulders no longer sagged under invisible weight. Maybe I wasn't the daughter they wanted, but I was the woman I needed to become. I sat down at my desk, opened my email, and typed a message to Mr. Cardoza. Subject: "Finish it. Body: I'm ready to close everything. Let's proceed with final filing. Thank you." Morning sunlight spilled across the counter as I poured myself a fresh cup of coffee. The bitterness didn't bite as hard anymore. Then came the ding of a new message. I opened it without hesitation. Subject: Property title confirmation body. Attached is the finalized title transfer. You are now officially the sole name listed on the deed. For the first time in years, I felt the weight shift. I wasn't chasing validation anymore. I owned the ground beneath my feet. I set the deed down on my new kitchen counter, the weight of its pages far lighter than the years it represented. The envelope was thick, the paper embossed, my name bold and alone. No co-owner, no beneficiary, no on behalf of. Just me. But paper, no matter how official, can't rebuild trust. It doesn't sweep up the shattered pieces of loyalty, nor does it restore what was lost in all the silence and betrayal. It was mine now. The title, the house, the space, but everything else, the memories, the fractured bonds, the sting of words unforgotten, those still floated somewhere in the air, just out of reach. The headlines were gone now. The social media frenzy had fizzled into dust. Travis hadn't posted in over a week. Mutual friends had long since gone quiet, either out of discomfort or allegiance. I didn't feel triumphant. I didn't feel angry either. I felt still. In my new townhouse, smaller than the last place but fully paid and deeply mine, I stood barefoot on the cool hardwood. The rooms were mostly empty, but they breathed. I had air again. For the first time, every inch of where I live belongs to me, I whispered. It was early evening. The sky outside dulled into a lavender haze, and the smell of rain lingered from a passing shower. I wrapped my cardigan tighter and checked the mail, mostly junk, except for one padded envelope with handwriting I recognized. Inside was a folded letter and a flash drive. The letter was short, the tone careful. Subject: Hope you're well, body. We don't expect forgiveness. We didn't know what else to do. We made mistakes, but we raised you to be strong, and you've become exactly that. I hope one day you'll remember the good parts. Mom. I read it 3 times. No signature beyond Mom. No apology. Just an attempt at peace wrapped in distance. I didn't reply. Not because I wanted to punish her, but because I finally understood. Some things are better left unanswered. That weekend, June stopped by. I hadn't let many people into the new place yet, but she was the exception. We sat on the floor of my empty living room, still wearing our coats, sipping cheap Merlot out of mismatched mugs. So, she said after a long sip, was it worth it? I didn't answer right away. My eyes wandered to the bare windows, the unpainted walls, the echo of our voices in a place still learning to hold sound. The title? Sure, I finally said. But the clarity? That's what I fought for. She nodded, slow and knowing. I needed to know I could stand up without being the one to break, I added. Later that night, I walked through the house, room by room. My footsteps soft but deliberate. I left one bedroom untouched. No furniture, no plans. Not because I was saving it for someone, but because I needed a space that symbolized what was still to come. A blank page, a fresh start. I sat down at my desk and opened my journal, leather-bound, pages bent with ink and coffee stains. Closure isn't justice, and justice isn't healing. But today, I chose myself. Maybe tomorrow I'll learn how to forgive. Before bed, I pulled the deed folder off the counter and slid it onto the shelf next to my birth certificate and passport. I didn't need to look at it anymore. I knew who it belonged to. I brushed my teeth, turned off the lights, and crawled into bed alone, but not lonely. Sleep came quickly, without resistance. No spreadsheet worries, no ghost texts from the past. My parents had once called me a freeloader, but I paid every cent, emotionally, financially, spiritually, and finally, fully I was free. Closure isn't justice, and justice isn't healing, but today I chose myself. Maybe tomorrow I'll learn how to forgive. Sometimes walking away isn't about weakness. It's about choosing peace over pleasing people. Maura gave, sacrificed, and endured. But in the end, she didn't win through revenge. She won by reclaiming her dignity. Have you ever had to set a boundary that cost you everything, but gave you yourself back? I'd love to hear your thoughts. Share your story in the comments below. And if this story moved you, don't forget to subscribe. More true-to-life stories about betrayal, healing, and strength are coming soon.